Welcome to the first of our six-part series, A Study in Proverbs. This Old Testament book is a compilation of teachings on wisdom as penned by Solomon. Solomon was known as the wisest man who lived when he penned these words. For we read in the Old Testament book of 1 Kings chapter 3, verses 9 through 14, Solomon's request and God's reply. Give your servant, therefore, an understanding mind to govern your people, that I may discern between good and evil. For who is able to govern this your great people? It pleased the Lord that Solomon had asked this. And God said to him, Because you have asked this, and have not asked for yourself long life or riches or the life of your enemies, but have asked for yourself understanding to discern what is right, behold, I now do according to your word. Behold, I give you a wise and discerning mind, so that none like you has been before, and none shall rise after you. I give you also what you have not asked, both riches and honor, so that no other king shall compare with you all your days. And if you will walk in my ways, keeping my statutes and my commandments, as your father David walked, then I will lengthen your days. As we look at the writings of Proverbs in our study, we shall do it in a rather unusual way, in that it will not be a verse-by-verse rendering, although we will read every verse of the 31 chapters. What we shall endeavor to do is, with each chapter, focus on a particular subject and talk briefly of it in a devotional style. Each chapter will be read and then a few minutes devoted to expanding on a topic chosen from that chapter. We'll spend but a few minutes on each chapter, just enough to whet our appetite for sure. This is not an exhaustive study, but one that seeks to open our eyes to Solomon's, yes, God's instruction on wisdom. I hope you'll enjoy these individual chapters stitched together from a series of daily devotionals presented. Proverbs chapter 1, day 1, to know wisdom. We'll begin reading in chapter 1, verse 1. The Proverbs of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight, to receive instruction in wise dealing, in righteousness, justice, and equity, to give prudence to the simple, knowledge and discretion to the youth. Let the wise hear and increase in learning, and the one who understands obtain guidance. To understand a proverb and a saying, the words of the wise and their riddles. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Fools despise wisdom and instruction. Hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching. For they are a graceful garland for your head, and pendants for your neck. My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, Come with us, let us lie in wait for blood. Let us ambush the innocent without reason. Like Sheol, let us swallow them alive and whole, like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all precious goods. We shall fill our houses with plunder, and throw in your lot among us. We will all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot from their paths, for their feet run to evil, and they make haste to shed blood. For in vain is a net spread in the sight of any bird. But these men lie in wait for their own blood. They set an ambush for their own lives. Such are the ways of everyone who is greedy for unjust gain. It takes away the life of its possessors. Wisdom cries aloud in the streets. In the markets she raises her voice. At the head of the noisy streets she cries out. At the entrance of the city gates she speaks. How long, O simple ones, will you love being simple? How long will scoffers delight in their scoffing, and fools hate knowledge? If you turn at my reproof, behold, I will pour out my spirit to you. I will make my words known to you. Because I have called, and you refuse to listen, have stretched out my hand and heeded no one, because you have ignored all my counsel, and would have none of my reproof, I also will laugh at your calamity. I will mock when terror strikes you. When terror strikes you like a storm, and your calamity comes like a whirlwind, when distress and anguish come upon you, then they will call upon me, but I will not answer. They will seek me diligently, but will not find me. Because they hated knowledge and did not choose the fear of the Lord, would have none of my counsel, and despised all my reproof. Therefore they shall eat the fruit of their way, and have their fill of their own devices. For the simple are killed by their turning away, and the complacency of fools destroys them. But whoever listens to me will dwell secure, and will be at ease without dread of disaster. Some thoughts from Proverbs 1 today, and a warning. Science stuff straight ahead. In the makeup of plants and trees, there is a section that is essential to transferring nutrients back and forth called the pith. In trees, it is surrounded by the xylem and phloem and is found in the rings radiating out from the center. In plants, generally speaking, the pith is in the center of the stem. We recognize this as the core of the stem. Okay, science lesson is over for today. Why would I want to know this? Well, good question. Sometimes we borrow scientific jargon and connect the dots to help us to grasp big meanings. The word pith is associated with the core of a plant, and the word core suggests the center or essence of something. If I'm given the task of defining what a proverb is, using the economy of words, I would include such words as wisdom, knowledge, understanding, maxim, short saying, or pithy. That's helpful, but now I need a working definition beyond just a word. I might say, proverbs are short sayings intended to impart wisdom, or a maxim intended to guide a person into an understanding of a truth. How about a pithy saying used simply so as to express a truth? There, that ought to suffice. Perhaps the word pithy would be a leading candidate to help in understanding what a proverb is. Another way of grasping a concept of a proverb is to give an example. Popular proverbs in our culture have been passed down from generation to generation. Perhaps one of the best-known collectors of proverbs in modern times, though not modern to some, was Benjamin Franklin. His Farmer's Almanac was sprinkled with wise sayings, like early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise, or well done is better than well said. It may be the best collection ever assembled is that of Solomon in the Old Testament book of Proverbs. Most of this book is attributed to Solomon, with the exception of the end of the book, which are said to be from Agur, chapter 30, and Lemuel, chapter 31. Here's a little of what we know of Solomon's collections from 1 Kings chapter 4, verses 31 through 33. It tells us, "For he was wiser than all other men, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahal, and his fame was in all the surrounding nations. He also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows around the wall. He spoke also of beasts and of birds and reptiles and fish." Solomon begins the very core of learning when he says in chapter 1 and verse 2, to know. Interestingly enough, the Hebrew word for this word know is yada. I wouldn't confuse that with our modern yada, yada, yada. But it seems essentially to ascertain by seeing or observation. Of the 3,000 proverbs that Solomon collected, we have but a fraction in the book of Proverbs. But there is certainly enough to whet our appetite. Solomon makes clear the distinction between wise and foolish, as well as wisdom and folly. In our very first chapter, Solomon volleys back and forth telling of the benefits of wisdom and the consequences of enticements of sinners. Both call out to us for the purpose of our following. Yet which we shall follow is entirely up to us. Which we shall love depends on our attitude. Shall we fear the Lord or despise wisdom? Jesus said, "Wisdom is justified by her deeds." Matthew 11:19. Weigh out for yourselves and observe the fruit wisdom bears, over and against the fruit of folly. What kind of fruit have you been bearing in your life? And Lord willing, we'll see you again tomorrow. Day 2, a study in Proverbs. We'll be in Proverbs chapter 2. My son, if you receive my words and treasure up my commandments with you, making your ear attentive to wisdom and inclining your heart to understanding. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding, if you seek it like silver and search for it as for hidden treasures, then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord gives wisdom, from his mouth come knowledge and understanding. He stores up sound wisdom for the upright. He is a shield to those who walk in integrity, guarding the paths of justice and watching over the way of his saints. Then you will understand righteousness and justice and equity, every good path. For wisdom will come into your heart, and knowledge will be pleasant to your soul. Discretion will watch over you. Understanding will guard you, delivering you from the way of evil, from men of perverted speech, who forsake the paths of uprightness to walk in the ways of darkness, who rejoice in doing evil and delight in the perverseness of evil, men whose paths are crooked and who are devious in their ways. So you will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words, who forsakes the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. For her house sinks down to death, and her paths to the departed. None who go to her come back, nor do they regain the paths of life. So you will walk in the way of the good, and keep to the paths of the righteous. For the upright will inhabit the land, and those with integrity will remain in it. But the wicked will be cut off from the land, and the treacherous will be rooted out of it. Our verse for consideration today is verse 3. Yes, if you call out for insight and raise your voice for understanding. Do you know what I'm leery of? Those commercials that promise big results. You know the ones, the chiseled bodies of those 0% body fat athletes working out on those gizmos that you ride or lift or pull or contort your bodies to get you into shape. And those contraptions you buy for your kitchen that promise to transform your ordinary meals into something from those cooking shows. Or those supplements that are designed to help your, what's that thing? Your memory. They're just too good to be true. In today's passage, Solomon makes a pretty big promise. Can it be that simple? Just want it, and you can have it? Well, that's the problem with advertising. Very seldom do you see an ad that says, if you work out on this machine endlessly, day after day, you'll get that body. Or if you study cooking and cuisine for years, you could use this device. Or take this pill for an extended period and you'll get I've forgotten what that pill's supposed to get. But you'll get it. Does Solomon promise immediate results effortlessly? No. Look at the process. First, you must receive his words, and that's not as easy as it sounds. Then you must treat it like a treasure, something of great value. Then you must be actively listening for wisdom. You must stretch out your heart towards understanding. Cry for it. Scream for it if you must. You must seek it as if it were an ancient expedition searching for precious metals or hidden treasures that must be unearthed. Does that sound easy? You think this is a 5-minute exercise in the morning while you're rushing to get on with your day? Absolutely not. This is a consuming desire, yes, an obsession to get wisdom. My eyes have been attentive in the scriptures for the if-then propositions, and there are dozens and dozens in the Bible. They typically follow the, if you do this, good or bad, then you can expect this. Consequently, again, good or bad. If, and it all hinges on that one word, if. If you listen and take in those words and commandments and listen to wisdom and seek out understanding, call out for knowledge, like as it were men seeking worldly treasures, then the promise comes. Then you will understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. It sounds rather familiar, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what James admonishes to us. James 1 verses 5 through 8 tells us, "If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all, without reproach, and it will be given to him. But let him ask in faith, and with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like the wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways." In its essence, that is what Jesus taught in the Beatitudes. In Matthew chapter 5 and verse 6, Jesus tells us, "Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied." If I'm really honest with myself, the reason those gizmos and contraptions and potions don't work is more than likely my own lack of desire and motivation. James says I must pursue this desire for wisdom with faith, and faith is not just a mere belief, but an active one. Jesus says, "If I hunger and thirst, I will be filled." Hunger and thirst are two of the most powerful forces in the human realm. The psalmist writes, "As the deer pants for the water brooks, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?" Psalm 42, verses 1 and 2. And again the psalmist writes in Psalm 107, verse 9, "For he satisfies the longing soul, and the hungry soul he fills with good things." The payoff for this acquisition of wisdom, knowledge, and understanding comes when they watch over you and protect you from the ways of evil, verse 12, from men who walk in darkness, verse 13, and from the forbidden woman whose ways lead to death, verses 16 through 19. What we get is not just information for information's sake, but that which enriches life. Are you ready for a treasure hunt today? And Lord willing, we'll meet again tomorrow. A study of Proverbs, Day 3. In Proverbs chapter 3. "My son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. For length of days and years of life and peace they will add to you. Let not steadfast love and faithfulness forsake you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart. So you will find favor and good success in the sight of God and man. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. Be not wise in your own eyes. Fear the Lord, and turn away from evil. It will be healing to your flesh and refreshment to your bones. Honor the Lord with your wealth, and with the firstfruits of all your produce. Then your barns will be filled with plenty, and your vats will be bursting with wine. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom, and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. She is more precious than jewels, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Long life is in her right hand. In her left hand are riches and honor. Her ways are ways of plenteousness, and all her paths are peace. She is a tree of life to those who lay hold of her. Those who hold her fast are called blessed. The Lord by wisdom founded the earth. By understanding he established the heavens. By his knowledge the deeps broke open, and the clouds dropped down the dew. My son, do not lose sight of these. Keep sound wisdom and discretion, and they will be life for your soul, and adornment for your neck. Then you will walk on your way securely, and your foot will not stumble. If you lie down, you will not be afraid. When you lie down, your sleep will be sweet. Do not be afraid of sudden terror, or of the ruin of the wicked when it comes. For the Lord will be your confidence, and will keep your foot from being caught. Do not withhold good from those to whom it is due, when it is in your power to do it. Do not say to your neighbor, "Go and come again. Tomorrow I will give it," when you have it with you. Do not plan evil against your neighbor who dwells trustingly beside you. Do not contend with a man for no reason, when he has done you no harm. Do not envy a man of violence, and do not choose any of his ways. For the devious person is an abomination to the Lord, but the upright are in his confidence. The Lord's curse is on the house of the wicked, but he blesses the dwelling of the righteous. Towards scorners he is scornful, but to the humble he gives favor. The wise will inherit honor, but fools get disgrace. Our proverb for today is verses 11 and 12. My son, do not despise the Lord's discipline, or be weary of his reproof. For the Lord reproves him whom he loves, as a father the son in whom he delights. Every child growing up in school needed a Mr. Galbraith in their lives. A throwback to the old days of strict disciplinarian teachers, Mr. Galbraith exacted excellence from his students. He drilled students and pushed them to do their best. He didn't tolerate any disruptive behavior in the classroom. As a result, he was feared. At the time, we couldn't appreciate what he was trying to accomplish. We only saw the seeming harshness of his style. Years later, when students would gather together to talk about the old days of school, one after the other of my classmates remarked that Mr. Galbraith had been among their favorite teachers. We can look back and see that it was not meanness or anger that drove our beloved teacher, but a desire for students to be the best they could be. Such is the nature of discipline. Isn't it interesting that when a person pursues a branch of learning, it is referred to as a discipline? Likewise, in some areas of martial arts, the method of training is called discipline. Discipline with clearly laid out structure with well-defined rules and expectations. Why? Discipline instills dedication and is most effective in helping students learn. Too often, students don't see this in a positive light. Such is the case with the discipline of the Lord. By virtue of Solomon attaching the idea of becoming weary or despising such things, he states a conclusion that people often come to when faced with such behavior, modification techniques by the Lord. He further connects such practices with that of a loving earthly father. If the motivation of the father is love, then he will discipline his child. If anger is at the root of discipline, and thus is meted out in a brutal way, then love is not the true motivation. So it is with the Lord. It is not anger or wrath, but love at the heart of his discipline. Throughout the book of Proverbs, you will note the idea over and over of disciplining a child. Take these examples. In chapter 29 and verse 15, the rod and reproof give wisdom, but a child left to himself brings shame to his mother. In verse 17 of chapter 29, discipline your son, and he will give you rest. He will give delight to your heart. In chapter 13 and verse 24, whoever spares the rod hates his son, but he who loves him is diligent to discipline him. Chapter 19 and verse 18, discipline your son, for there is hope. Do not set your heart on putting him to death. And finally, Proverbs chapter 23 and verses 13 and 14, do not withhold discipline from a child. If you strike him with a rod, he will not die. If you strike him with a rod, you will save his soul from Sheol. When the writer of Hebrews in chapter 12 of his letter quotes our verses for the day, he connects the thought of the hardships the Christian has endured and compares it to that of what Christ himself endured. Jesus endured hardship and hostility, not because of sin, but because it perfected him and made him a compassionate high priest, able to sympathize with us. Hebrews 4 and 15. So, when seen in the light of love and that which perfects, discipline is welcomed. How is the perfection process going in your life? Lord willing, we'll meet again tomorrow. A study in Proverbs, Day 4, A Father's Instructions, Chapter 4. Hear, O sons, a father's instruction, and be attentive that you may gain insight. For I give you good precepts. Do not forsake my teaching. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother, he taught me and said to me, let your heart hold fast my words. Keep my commandments and live. Get wisdom, get insight. Do not forget and do not turn away from the words of my mouth. Do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. The beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. Prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. She will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. Hear, my son, and accept my words, that the years of your life may be many. I have taught you the way of wisdom. I have led you in the paths of uprightness. When you walk, your step will not be hampered, and if you run, you will not stumble. Keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. Do not enter the path of the wicked, and do not walk in the way of evil. Avoid it. Do not go on it. Turn away from it and pass on. For they cannot sleep unless they have done wrong. They are robbed of sleep unless they have made someone stumble. For they eat the bread of wickedness and drink the wine of violence. But the path of the righteous is like the light of dawn, which shines brighter and brighter until full day. The way of the wicked is like deep darkness. They do not know over what they stumble. My son, be attentive to my words. Incline your ear to my sayings. Let them not escape from your sight. Keep them within your heart, for they are life to those who find them, and healing to all their flesh. Keep your heart with all vigilance, for from it flow the springs of life. Put away from you crooked speech, and put devious talk far from you. Let your eyes look directly forward, and your gaze be straight before you. Ponder the path of your feet, and all your ways will be sure. Do not swerve to the right or to the left. Turn your foot away from evil. Our passage for the day is verse 4. He taught me and said, let your heart hold fast my words. Keep my commandments and live. Have you ever heard the saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree? That's one of those pithy sayings that have been passed down and is filled with insight. Generally speaking, the truth in it is that as a parent is, so is the child. That can be a good thing when we take on the attributes of a caring mother or compassionate father, or it also can be negative when we exhibit the tendency to become easily angered or the town gossip just like our parents. We tend to fill the shoes quite well of those of our parents that they wore, like it or not. The entirety of this chapter is really a letter from father to son. He recalls himself as a youth, and his father taught him the truths of life and the pursuit of wisdom. It is noteworthy that wisdom is personified as a woman. In verse 6, do not forsake her, and she will keep you. Love her, and she will guard you. Verse 8, prize her highly, and she will exalt you. She will honor you if you embrace her. In verse 9, she will place on your head a graceful garland. She will bestow on you a beautiful crown. And finally, in verse 13, keep hold of instruction. Do not let go. Guard her, for she is your life. In the midst of this, he urges him, the beginning of wisdom is this: get wisdom, and whatever you get insight. It is as if he is giving advice of who to marry. For in the choice of one's wife for life, it sets the stage for all of life to follow. As you read on, that's exactly what follows. Benefit after benefit is listed for what his son can expect if he follows his father's instructions. Now, in order for the son to believe this, he must see the evidence. And what evidence is offered? The life of the father. How could a son follow the father's instructions if the father himself had spurned his father's instructions? When did this teaching begin? Well, let's let the text tell us. When I was a son with my father, tender, the only one in the sight of my mother. Later in the book of Proverbs, we will read this admonition. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. Proverbs 22:6. Many things will affect and influence a child as he or she grows. A parent's love ought to drive us to be the major influence as they are prepared to go on into the world. This is a constant and ongoing process all the days of their lives at home. As Moses is led by the Holy Spirit to write the Word of God, he tells us in Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6 and 7, "And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk on the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise." When you think about it, the primary responsibility for teaching children is not that of the public or private schools, or even Bible classes in a congregation. It ought to be that of the parents. Paul writes to the church at Ephesus in Ephesians chapter 6 and verse 4, "Fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, but bring them up in the discipline and instruction of the Lord." And as for Timothy, Paul wrote, "And how from childhood you have been acquainted with the sacred writings, which are able to make you wise for salvation through faith in Christ Jesus." 2 Timothy 3:15. How close do you want that apple to fall from your tree? Lord willing, we'll meet again tomorrow. A study in Proverbs, day 5. Proverbs chapter 5, from your own cistern. "My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion, and your lips may guard knowledge. For the lips of a forbidden woman drip honey, and her speech is smoother than oil. But in the end she is bitter as wormwood, sharp as a two-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps follow the path to Sheol. She does not ponder the path of life. Her ways wander, and she does not know it. And now, O sons, listen to me, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house, lest you give your honor to others, and your years to the merciless, lest strangers take their fill of your strength, and your labors go to the house of a foreigner. And at the end of your life you groan when your flesh and body are consumed. You say, 'How I hated discipline, and my heart despised reproof. I did not listen to the voice of my teachers, or incline my ear to my instructors. I am at the brink of utter ruin in the assembled congregation. Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well. Should your springs be scattered abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be for yourself alone, and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed, and rejoice in the wife of your youth, a lovely deer, a graceful doe. Let her breast fill you at all times with delight. Be intoxicated always in her love. Why should you be intoxicated, my son, with a forbidden woman, and embrace the bosom of an adulteress? For a man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord. He ponders all his paths. The iniquities of the wicked ensnare him, and he is held fast in the cords of sin. He dies for lack of discipline, and because of his great folly he is led astray." Our verse for consideration today is verse 15. "Drink water from your own cistern, flowing water from your own well." What is this thing called love? I walked into a classroom in high school to see this sentence scrawled across the chalkboard. I've pondered that thought over the years and conclude that it is a deep well rich with flowing water, enough to quench the thirst of all who will drink it. It is interesting the analogies and metaphors that are applied to a water well. You've heard, "When the well's dry, we know the worth of water." Or how about this one? You can't draw water from an empty well, or dig the well before you are thirsty. For many in the modern Western world, the idea of a well is much different to that of the ancient world. In antiquity, the flowing well meant life. Without it, in the arid regions, life and vitality ceased. In parts of third world countries today, a single well supplies families and villages for miles around, as we have witnessed in the West African country of Ghana. Solomon uses the cistern or flowing well as a metaphor for the marriage. As in other chapters, Solomon leads into the practical application of teaching by giving solemn and prudent advice. In verses 1 and 2, he leads with, "My son, be attentive to my wisdom. Incline your ear to my understanding, that you may keep discretion, and your lips may guard knowledge." Notice the fourfold manner of things he wishes to impart. Wisdom, or the practical application of knowledge. Understanding, the reason or intelligence. Comprehension. Also note the four descriptive phrases that accompany them. First, to be attentive, or aware, or to hearken. To incline, that means to stretch forth or pay close attention. To keep, to put a hedge or barrier so as to keep it in. And to guard, protect and preserve and keep. As we get to verse 7, Solomon again warns, "And now, O sons, listen to me, and do not depart from the words of my mouth. Keep your way far from her, and do not go near the door of her house." The consequences of not regarding his sage advice? You'll lose your honor and your years, your strength and your labor. Your flesh and body are consumed. And how often have these words of regret been uttered, as verse 13 and 14? "I did not listen to the voice of my teachers, or incline my ear to my instructors." I am at the brink of utter ruin in the assembled congregation. How does a man avoid such ruin from wanton behavior? Drink water from your own cistern. Plainly spoken, be happy with your own wife and not another woman. Be intoxicated always in her love, verse 19. In the 3,000 years since the book of Proverbs was penned, the tale of ruination by foolish men are strewn across the centuries. Scattered pieces of families, broken homes, and wayward children as a result of careless and needless actions of men without thought of the consequences. As you go through the book of Proverbs, have your eyes trained on verses that reinforce the love within marriage and warn against the seeds of discontent. In chapter 24, in verses 3 and 4, "By wisdom a house is built, by understanding it is established. By knowledge the rooms are filled with all precious and pleasant riches." Chapter 14 and verse 1, "The wisest of women builds her house, but folly with her own hands tears it down." And in chapter 31 and verse 10, "An excellent wife who can find? She is far more precious than jewels." And again in chapter 31 and verse 28, "Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her." Have you recognized the hard work a home, a family, and a marriage requires? And Lord willing, we'll meet again tomorrow. A study in Proverbs, day 6. 6 things, yes, 7. "My son, if you have put up security for your neighbor, have given your pledge for a stranger, if you are snared in the words of your mouth, caught in the words of your mouth, then do this, my son, and save yourself, for you have come into the hand of your neighbor. Go, hasten, and plead urgently with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep, and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself like a gazelle from the hand of the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, O sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief officer or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? When will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber and want like an armed man. A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech, winks his eyes, signals with his feet, points with his finger, with perverted heart devises evil, continually sowing discord. Therefore calamity will come upon him suddenly. In a moment he will be broken beyond healing. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. My son, keep your father's commandment, and forsake not your mother's teaching. Bind them on your heart always. Tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will lead you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. And when you awake, they will talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp and a teaching light. And the reproofs of discipline are the way of life, to preserve you from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, and do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For the price of a prostitute is only a loaf of bread, but a married woman hunts down a precious life. Can a man carry fire next to his chest and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? So is he who goes in to his neighbor's wife. None who touches her will go unpunished. People do not despise a thief if he steals to satisfy his appetite when he is hungry. But if he's caught, he will pay sevenfold. He will give all the goods of his house. He who commits adultery lacks sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. For a jealousy makes a man furious, and he will not spare when he takes revenge. He will accept no compensation. He will refuse though you multiply gifts. Our passage today is verses 16 to 19. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are an abomination to him. Haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that make haste to run to evil, a false witness who breathes out lies, and one who sows discord among brothers. Are you the type of person that likes to do things in an orderly fashion? Go about the day with a list of things to do. Or when you go shopping, have that list in front of you so that you know what you want to get. No more, no less. Or perhaps the type of person who learns easy from lists. Lists of states, presidents, elements, names, etc. When looking at an area, state, or country, many times a video will show the top 10 places to visit or 5 must-see sites of this city. There's a list of the 7 deadly sins: pride, greed, lust, anger, gluttony, envy, and sloth, and corresponding the 7 virtues: humility, charity, chastity, patience, temperance, kindness, and diligence. Our passage today is of particular note in that it lists 7 things that God hates that are an abomination to him. Some might chide, how can God hate? He is the God of love. Don't be lured into that debate. Just take these verses at face value, and it becomes apparent what the message is. First, there are a couple of interesting aspects of this. Solomon uses a technique here of a lesser number followed by one greater. In this case, 6 things, then 7. Some have speculated that as bad as the first 6 are, the last thing is worst of all. Yet it's more likely that this is simply a method used to show that number 7, as it is used so many times in the Bible to reflect the ultimate number. Second is the use of body parts: the eyes, the tongue, the hand, the heart, and feet, to represent these which God hates. Haughty is used 5 times in Proverbs. Pride 5 times. Proud 3 times. Arrogant and arrogance 4 times. It is marked by the dependence upon self and the elevation of self above others to the exclusion of God. It is typified by the look of the eyes. We're familiar with the phrase, looking down at others. The lying tongue. Do a quick search in the tongue, the mouth, and the lips in Proverbs and see the power of them, especially the tongue that lies. In its essence, speech is directly involved in 3 of the 7 on our list today. Hands that shed innocent blood. It started with the first murder in Genesis 4 and continues on. Thou shalt not murder, as the commandment says. The heart devising evil. Jesus said of the heart, for out of the heart come evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, and slander. Matthew 15:19. Feet that run to evil. Not simply people who do evil, but the swiftness and propensity with which they proceed. A false witness, the telling of lies so as to bring down the innocent to ruin. One who sows discord. Those who spread strife, division, and discord finish out our list. Now go back for a moment and take a look at verses 12 through 15, and you'll find this person doing these seven things which God hates. The Hebrew word for him is Belial, and appropriately named at that, for so he is in God's sight. Take care that you don't join in these 6, yes, 7 things that God hates. And Lord willing, we'll see you again tomorrow. I hope this study has been profitable today, and I hope that you will join us again in our next class as we continue to look at the Proverbs of Solomon. Join us again, won't you?